Welcome everyone, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be painting in real time. I'm going to be painting an eyeball of a creature of some kind. Total fantasy, no reference at all. But yeah, I'm going to be painting in real time. This was a request I had from one of my subscribers to slow it down, paint in real time, show the whole process from beginning to end, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to be painting on an artist trading card. I think this one is just a paper, like a thicker paper stock. And I have toned the paper a little bit with just a thin acrylic wash. Just to start out, I'm going to, again, with no reference, just start sketching the rough shape of an eye. I think the main point of this video really isn't to paint something, super realistic. It's really just to show the techniques that I use, that I'm practicing to try and paint realistic and fantasy eyes. I'm going to show the whole video, again, real time, no time lapse. So there might be some gaps where I'm not talking. Feel free to forward, ahead, rewind, etc. I'm going to put in some chapter markers in the video so that you can see sort of the key moments in time to kind of pay attention to. This isn't honestly that important this stage, because I'm not really trying to paint a specific eye. I'm just trying to get a rough, the rough shapes. I'm going to try and not cut out any actual painting or drawing. I'm not going to speed it up, that kind of stuff. I'll show you from time to time the paint that I'm using so you can see it on the palette and get a better sense of what that looks like. So yeah, I'm going to just start with a little titanium white and some phthalo blue. I believe this is I think this might be turquoise actually. So titanium white and turquoise, just mixing them together to get a nice blue to lay down as a background. As you can tell, you might be able to tell from the video, I don't really mix the paint up too thoroughly. And that leaves, that creates these little gradations. Again, they probably won't stay there. I'm going to end up covering a lot of this up anyway, but it's a nice effect when you don't mix the paint completely thoroughly, you don't get a solid flat color. You get sort of a gradient effect. Hopefully you can see that in the video. And I'm being probably too careful with this at this point, but I'm just showing you how I paint. Just want to lay down this nice blue, and then we'll just start adding a lot of layers on top from this point on. Again, you can start to see that I've got a little bit of the darker turquoise, and I'm just kind of playing around with it. I'm going to repeat this probably a lot, but at this stage of the game, what I'm doing is just playing with color and playing with layers until I feel like it's looking good to me. So, nothing is sacred. I'm not trying to save this. I'm just playing with the paint. I kind of have some steps in my mind. I know the steps that I'm going to take, but I'm not overly concerned about preserving any of this at this point. I just want to have a nice solid blue gradient background to work from. Here I'm using a little bit of a slow dry gel, and I'm mixing that in with the paint. So it's like a 25% ratio, but again, I'm just eyeballing it. Pardon the pun. But that keeps the paint fluid for a little bit longer. It lets me blend it a little bit better, and I'm just coming back now and trying to create a second layer of a lighter tone to start to get some of the effects that you get that you see in eyeballs. Again, kind of squiggly, creating these lines that are sort of radiating out from the pupil, but again, not being too careful, just trying to create some texture. This is another thing you'll see me do from time to time, is switch between The brush that I'm laying down the paint with, between that and a dry brush, various brushes of various sizes. This one probably was too big. I ended up smushing the paint quite a bit. But again, it doesn't matter. I'm just slowly starting to build up texture and kind of playing with it just to see what effects I can get. So I'm coming back with a much smaller liner brush and a very intense turquoise, and I'm going to start to just like layer in just thinner lines on top of that lighter color that we just did. And you'll see throughout this video, this is just a series of this same sort of pattern, like repeating, adding, layer after layer, and experimenting with it, and alternating between laying down the paint and then smudging the paint around with a different brush, with a second brush. So at this point, I think I quickly took the liner brush and dipped it in water just to get the paint off of it. And while it's damp, I'm going back and I'm just smudging around the paint that I had laid down, just making sure that not every single edge is super sharp. Like some of these are blurry. Most of them end up very blurry after this pass, but when I was doing this, I was trying to leave a few little marks pristine, if you will. I'm showing here that I have several different brushes that I can just pick up at any time and alternate between the paint, putting the paint down, and then with a dry brush or with a damp, clean brush, either way, just depending on the effect I'm trying to achieve, I'll go back and I will blur the edges of the paint that I just laid down. So you can see that's what I'm doing here. I'm going back and just kind of buffing that edge to make it soft. Kind of makes it blend in with the background and creates sort of like a little shadow effect. I want a darker shadow at the top of the eye, so I know that I'm just going to continue to build up paint there. And again, it's that same process of laying down paint with one brush and then going back with another and sort of blending it in and smudging it around, and just alternating between the two until I get it to a point where I like it. There's no real order. I don't necessarily always go in the same order when I'm doing these things, but at any rate, I know that before there's going to be an area between the color of the eyeball and the darkest area in the pupil that is sort of a transition zone where it's not going to be completely black. It's going to be like a darker tone of whatever color the eye is. So in this case, this turquoise. So before I put down the black, I'm going around the edges of the pupil and just doing like a fuzzy little zone of darker turquoise, if that makes any sense. Using that same effect, right? Just putting down some solid color and then going back with a second brush and sort of blurring that paint. Now I'm going to go in with a really dark, like a carbon black. There's actually differences between the blacks that you can buy. There's like, Payne's Gray, which tends to be kind of a bluish black. There's an ivory black, which also has a little bit of a blue tone. This is some very dirty water here I'm using. Again, I'm not being too careful about my paint mixing up. But carbon black is a very dark, straight black, and I like to use it for eyes. It kind of just absorbs all the light and looks really nice when you put white reflections on top of it. So here I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the pupil, fairly carefully. I'm going to try to make a circle as best I can, right? Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. The edges where the light is where the color is sort of fuzzy, helps a little bit. Again, I don't think an eye is perfectly round, from what I recall looking at references. At any rate, I'm not trying to be too perfect with the circle. I just want to, do my best. When I get close to the edges, though, I do take a smaller brush just to be a little more careful, so you don't end up, with a big blob of black paint, really, messing up the circle. And here I'm going back, just grabbing more pure paint and just tightening up the edge. Hopefully you can see it in the video, but I want to make sure and not cover up that gradient that I've created with the turquoise as it blends into the larger part of the eye. I find it very difficult to talk about this stuff. It's really interesting. I don't always have words for the things that I'm doing, so I'm trying my best here. Hopefully it's helpful for you all. What am I doing here? Okay, so I'm mixing up a little bit of a grayish blue, and I'm going to start intensifying the shadow at the top of the eye. And again, I'm going to repeat myself over and over, but I'm taking, basically putting the paint down with one brush and then taking some water or an almost dry brush. It's a little bit damp, and then blending that color down so that it's not a harsh line at the edge of the shadow. And if you don't know, acrylic paint dries really fast, so these layers are going down one on top of the other. It almost dries, within seconds, if not minutes, in some cases, depending on the paint. And so you can just work very quickly and just keep building up layers. I really love that. And I know oils have their own advantages, right? When you're using oil, it stays open for days, if not weeks, and sometimes even longer, right? Depending on the mediums that you mix with it, etc. And there's obviously benefits to that, but I really love the immediacy of acrylic and how you can just, move very quickly. So here I'm just taking some black while I have it out and just tightening up this edge of the eye. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I'm not doing a perfect job on this eye because I wanted this video not to be like crazy long. I could take up to 2 hours working on an eye like this if I really wanted to. I end up adding like a fur, almost like a feathery fur effect, but I don't really take my time and do an amazing job with it. It's just really to fill in the space quickly and kind of complete the image. Maybe I'll do another video where I just take it in parts and do just the eye and then just the outside separately, if you guys are interested in that. As the paint's drying, I'm going back and adding a second or third coat of black, just trying to get it as intense as I can. And here I'm just kind of goofing around with the edges just to blend it a little better into the color. Now I'm going to take a much lighter blue, so mixing in more white. The paint's a little drier now. I still have that blending medium or that slow dry medium here that I can use a little bit of that and keep it active a little longer. But I'm going back with a very small, that same liner brush, and I'm just starting to work in some lighter, not verticals, but radials, lines coming out from the center. And I know there's a word for this. I probably should have looked it up for what these actual structures are within the eye. But I'm just trying to add another layer of texture on top of the previous couple of layers. I spray, you probably noticed too, I spray a little water. Again, that's not a ton of water. I'm just using a little spray bottle and just kind of misting the paint to make it a little more active. So it goes down nicer. It's okay if it's a little bit dry, right, with this kind of effect, because I want these to be kind of a little bit scratchy, kind of I don't know what the right word is. It's just that you have to just play with the texture, right? In some cases you want the paint to be really smooth and go down really fluid, and then other times you might want it to be a little more have a little more resistance and kind of grab the paper a little differently. That probably doesn't make any sense at all. But I guess long story short is you kind of just need to practice playing with the paint and using it when it's in different states of either being really wet and active, or almost, thicker, and kind of see what kind of effects you can get with it in those various states. And as you could tell, I went back and buffed it a little bit with another brush, just kind of, making the edges a little bit softer. Now I'm starting to play. I'm going to start playing with some transparent color, and I'm mixing in a little bit of the blue, a little more water, and I'm taking this transparent gold green, and I'm just going to start layering it over what I've already done in certain areas. And again, I'm not trying to be perfect with this. I just want to add some variety. I want the eye to have some depth to it. Sometimes you'll see these eyes, especially with certain creatures, where it's not all one color. I mean, humans have eyes that are mixed, right? You'll see sometimes there's a little bit of brown, a little bit of hazel mixed in with the blue. So I'm just playing with that and just trying to see where it looks good to add this layer of transparency. And same technique, right? I know it's super repetitive, but that's what I'm doing, right? I'm just talking through it, laying down some paint with one brush, and then smudging it around with a different brush. I mean, the point of that is that if you tried to paint, it's probably, I think it's obvious, but I'll state it anyway. If you just used one brush and you had it loaded with paint, everywhere you put that brush, it's going to put the paint down, right? So if you have a second brush that has no paint on it, whether it's wet or dry, you can smudge that paint around and move it around without adding more paint or to the painting. Now I'm taking another transparent color. This is quinacridone nickel, and similar to the slow dry gel, I'm using a glazing medium. They work similarly, in my opinion. So basically I'm mixing a little bit of this satin glazing liquid with the transparent nickel, and similar to what we were doing with the green, I'm going back in and just adding a little bit of that color on top, just to get more depth and more color interest. Yeah, it's really subtle at first, so I start out slow and just add a little bit of a time just to see, right, how it looks, and then I slowly kind of add more. As I get more confident or just feel like I need more of a color, I'll start to slowly add in more. Yeah, it's pretty subtle. You probably can't really see it that much, but again, this is part of my process. I'm not I don't have it in my mind exactly what I'm trying to do with this. I'm just trying to experiment a little bit with it, and so I'm just slowly adding it in and just seeing what works. And I've done this before with these colors. I really love using the green gold and the nickel, and turquoise and blue. Like those color combinations, I find interesting, and I've painted several things in the past where I've used those, especially the transparent colors on top of blues and other things like that, to get really nice effects. So here we go. I'm going to add in a little bit more this time, be a little more aggressive with it. Again, it's going to be pretty subtle, but you'll see the difference, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So, I feel like certain things, like I've done a little bit of, I've done things where I've painted like gray mountains, and then I've come back with the green and the nickel, and like it almost creates like an algae effect, or like a rusty effect, or like minerals or sort of stains that are like coming down the face of a mountain wall, and it works really well in that scenario. And same kind of thing exactly, except for using gray instead of blue as the underpaint. But for eyes, it's a nice effect. You can do some neat things. There's a transparent alizarin crimson, which also works really well, depending on what you're trying to do for a glaze. I'm going back with the darker, pure color that I started with, and I'm just adding in a little bit of lines and sort of like roughing up the edge of the eye. At this point, you can start to see, hopefully, the effect that you're getting some real depth. There's a real sort of a realistic quality that's starting to happen as you build up all these layers. I guess in my mind, there's really no wrong way to do this. I'm not really, again, copying anything specific. I'm not looking at any reference at all. I'm just laying down, 4 or 5 of these layers to try to start to get kind of mimic, right, what an eye looks like with the light when the light hits it. As you can imagine, it's really going to come together at the end when you start to put the white reflections on the eye. And it's hard to do that. For me, it's like, it feels like, here we go, right? Like, it makes me nervous, but it's necessary, and it really does kind of complete the effect. So same old story. I'm going back with a different brush. This one's probably a little bit damp, and I'm just kind of trying to smudge in some of the areas. There is a little bit of a period of time where if you wait too long, it won't work, right? The paint will dry. If you do it too quickly, the paint will just smudge around and get really muddy. So you kind of have to play with that. Try it, see how it looks, and then if it's too wet, wait just a few seconds and then try it again. I'm not trying to make this overly complicated. I feel like you have to experiment with it. You have to play with these things and kind of get a feel for it, knowing that you can always cover it up and start all over if you have to. Like, mistakes are how we learn. So like here, I had too much paint on my brush, and I just quickly had to go up there and wipe some of it off. I'm still wiping some of it off. I think I ended up using a towel to kind of get just the right amount of paint on there. And I'm going in now and adding even another layer of even a lighter blue to try to just continue to build up more and more of the depth. So I want you guys to help me out here. I'm trying really hard to explain my thought processes without being too repetitive and too boring, but I'm trying to explain it the way I would want it explained to me. For instance, here I've been doing a lot of lines that are pretty much straight from the center out, but I also every once in a while will do one that's like an angle, right? Like, I just try to make it not really abstract, but just vary the lines a little bit, so there's more. It's not like a completely perfectly even pattern. It's just more natural and organic, I guess. And like sometimes I'll have, like, there I had like a really long white or light streak, and I went back with the brush and kind of broke it up, right, so that it wasn't just like this really single dominant line that was there that really kind of draws your attention. So now I'm going back with, I think this is more of a transparent mix of the blue to try to just kind of create some darker areas that are a little fuzzy. And again, I don't know, like, over half of this is really just experimenting and playing and messing with it until I feel good about it. Now, I've done a bunch of these recently, so I'm starting to get the hang of it. But at the same time, I know there's a lot more for me to learn. So I do experiment quite a lot when I'm doing this kind of stuff and just trying new things. So here I'm kind of just making it up. I'm doing like this surrounding skin that goes around. Like sometimes you'll see it with birds or lizards or whatever. And although I'm being fairly careful to try and not paint up into the eye, I'm not really being too thoughtful about the color that I'm using or the texture that I'm going to be using. I'm just trying to very, very quickly just create a background so you can kind of see the overall effect. I would, again, probably take at least 30 minutes or so and just do this eye, this edge, if I were doing this on a larger painting. Here I'm just kind of blocking in some colors to try to get like some feathers or some fur. Not going to be too careful with it. I just want to kind of quickly complete it, right? Like I said, so that it feels like a completed study. And I guess the only real thought is that in this case, I want contrast between the blue. So I want to make sure that whatever skin tone I use, is kind of a complementary color. If I'm going really cool, like blue with the eyeball, then I want to go orange or warm with the surrounding area. Of course, you don't have to do that, right? The skin can be whatever color you want, but I'm thinking of like, a cool bird that that has like this icy blue eye, but maybe has like these warm feathers, like a hawk or something like that. And I think hawk eyes are probably yellow; they're not blue anyway. But at any rate, that was the thought process. And you can see I'm going pretty quickly here. I mean, I'm being careful, but I'm not, I'm not really trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to block in some color really quickly to finish this thing up. Again, I didn't want the video to be, 2 hours long. When I look back on these videos, I'm thinking I was being even more careful than I needed to be, right? Because most of this is going to get completely covered up with what I'm about to do in a few minutes. And none of this texture, none of this fidgeting and fussing that I'm doing matters at all. I just needed to get a single pass at this layer as quickly as possible without messing up the eye, and I really should have, probably gone faster with it or used a bigger brush. So before I finish the fur, before I finish the sort of the skin and surrounding areas, I'm going to go ahead and put in the reflections. And this used to be, again, one of the parts that stressed me out the most, but now it's probably one of my favorite things to do. And I've talked about this in other videos, but what I've been doing is starting out by putting down a little bit of paint and then going back with a different brush again, a dry brush, and starting to just blur and blend the edges of that paint very quickly to create sort of a soft reflection and kind of create a sense of shape, right? Like to the overall eye. Here I'm using some more of the blending slow dry gel or blending medium, whatever it is, to kind of make the paint flow a little bit better, so it gives me a little more time. And when you see me moving my brush to the side like that, I'm actually taking paint away. So if there's too much paint and it's going to smear around everywhere, I'll kind of wipe it off, with a brush and like that, and then I'm just kind of spreading it around and playing with it to try to get sort of get that realistic, subtle reflection happening. Usually when you see eyes, there's at least a couple spots like this where there's light being reflected. In some cases there may be more, right, depending on how many light sources there are, if there's light reflecting off different things. Again, I'm not using any reference at all, so I'm just kind of guessing as to where the light might look good. Same as the first step, lay down some white, kind of create that fuzzy background reflection, and then I'll go back with pure, opaque white and just drop in some very hot spots eventually. Yeah, no, I'm doing a third fuzzy area, same technique as before. And I think now, I think I'm going back with small brush and opaque white and just dropping in some highlights, right? Some very hot spots, couple little spots here and there in each of these areas to try to create that awesome like light reflection effect that you get in eyes. Next, I'm taking the smallest brush I have and I'm doing a very, very subtle like white reflection around the edge of the eye, where almost like you would have water, kind of pooling up. Again, this is probably almost impossible to see. If I was painting on a much larger canvas, it would be more important to do that. And it's very difficult to do it on an eye this small. But I'm doing it anyway, just kind of practicing, and because it's something I've been doing lately, and I think it works well to complete the effect. Okay, so just to finish up the background here, I'm taking some darker brown and a larger brush, and I'm not mixing up the paint too well. Again, I want some texture. I want to sort of like have the paint work for me. Like if it's not mixed up completely, there's some darker paint and some lighter paint, then just by brushing it on, I can start to get a fur-like effect or a feather effect. So now again for speed, I'm taking a really gnarly brush that's rough, hasn't been taken care of. It's just really stiff and has missing bristles, and I'm getting some darker paint and just quickly kind of scrubbing it over the background and creating like a cheat, right, to create texture like a fur or a feather texture really quickly. And I'll do this several times with several different layers and colors to kind of complete the effect, and then I'll end up going in with a smaller brush and doing finer details. And like I said, I'm doing this pretty rushed, right? Not that it has to be slow, but normally I would probably take my time and be a little more thoughtful and intentional in the way that I was applying the paint. But for this video, purposes, I was trying to rush through it. So it still turned out pretty good. I think it works fairly well. You can get the concept and get the point. So yeah, here it's like I laid down that first layer roughly with that nasty brush, and then I'm going back with a nicer brush while the paint is still wet, and kind of picking some spots and filling in some gaps and kind of smudging the paint around, and just playing with it. Of course, I'm not completely happy with the eye, so while that paint's drying, I go back and kind of just touch up spots that I see fit, as I see fit, and increasing some shadows and making some areas darker, that kind of thing. Yeah, so once that darker layer of fur or feathers or whatever is dry, I'm going back now with that same big old brush, but with a much lighter tone, and just kind of scratching another layer on again. Just quickly putting down another layer of texture. In some cases I probably overworked it. It was kind of nice to have some of that contrast, but as I messed with it, it kind of smudged it around. And anyways, I keep doing this over and over again until I just get it to a place that I like it. And same deal. Go back with a smaller brush and kind of add in some nicer, more intentional marks. Right? If there's can't think of a better way to say it. Right? Just some finer details and more intentional details. Just picking a couple areas and applying the paint in a more intentional way. I use the tape to hold it down just so it doesn't move around while I'm painting. Ideally I would have painted the background first, but here again I'm just showing that you can always go back and kind of fix up stuff, right? Like I'm just going back and painting over these little white areas where the tape had covered. And again, for this one, it's not like it has to be too perfect, so I'm just going to quickly fill in the gaps and blend it in as best I can, and hopefully it'll look okay. Well, that's about it for the video. So here's the final product, and turned out pretty good, I think, especially for, you know, quick little painting. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll do more of these real-time paintings if you like in the future. Just you know, let me know in the comments what you think, and if you have any questions, or if I stumbled through it and some of it didn't make sense, you know, just ask, let me know, and I'll try to do my best to clarify and explain what I was trying to say. So thanks again. Appreciate all you guys' support. Thanks again to Jackie for suggesting this content. And take care, and we'll see you next time. Peace.